You're out of order. Let's go ahead and start, folks. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the City of Independence, I welcome each of you in attendance, as well as those of you who may be watching on City 7 to the June 25th. I wish it was January. And here she comes. June 25th, 2019 meeting.
She can use the other one down there.
Just give us a moment. Yeah. Okay.
Problem solved.
You don't look like.
I hope this isn't an
apologize.
indication of the way the rest of this meeting is going to go. But before we begin our meeting, let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with our meetings, it is the responsibility of this commission to hold public hearings and make recommendations to the Independent City Council on matters related to zoning and land use changes within our city. We also consider and make decisions on plats, special use permits, and other issues, as well as changes in codes and policies that relate to city planning. Our procedure tonight for each case is as follows. First, the applicant will be recognized to speak on behalf of their case, followed by anyone else in attendance that wishes to speak in favor of the matter. Second, those who are in opposition or who have questions will then be recognized to speak. Then, if there was any opposition or questions from the public, the applicant will be asked to come forward and give a rebuttal period or address those concerns and questions. Once the applicant is finished, the chair will declare the public hearing portion of that case closed, and further comment from the public will not be recognized. At that point, the commissioners will have the opportunity to discuss the merits of the case with each other, and during the discussion, the commissioner reserves the right to ask questions of any party concerned. Finally, the commission will render a decision in the case. Because this is the only hearing of the case on the agenda tonight, all those who wish to speak will be heard. All comments and questions should be addressed to me, the chair, and not directly to the applicant or directly to the staff. The chair also requests that statements be kept brief and on point. Please do not ramble. Just state what your concerns are, and they will be addressed. If a statement has already been made by a previous speaker, then all you would need to do is simply state your agreement with that speaker. Now, to expedite tonight's meeting, the chair asks that everyone who wishes to testify or who's not sure but thinks that they might want to testify, please stand now and be sworn in. Okay. Those standing, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the whole truth before this commission? If so, please answer, I do. I do. Okay, thank you. You may be seated. Our first case, and only case, is case number 19-400-03, short-term rental at 224 North Delaware Street, the Secret Service House. Brian, would you please give the city report, please?
Sure. Austin and Kirsten Conley intend to operate a short-term rental from a recently renovated home at 224 North Delaware Street. This case had actually been scheduled for May 11th, but the Planning Commission meeting, but due to signage error by city staff, it's being heard today. So the first slide here, you can see the vicinity map. The property in question is at the southwest corner of Delaware and Truman, right across from the Truman home. The property is zoned R6, single-family residential. Surrounding properties are zoned R6, single-family residential to the north and south, and then it's R30 and PUD, which is moderate density residential planned unit development to the east and west. Here's the vicinity map, or the aerial photo of the area. You can see again the single-family homes to the north. There's more to the south, and then the Truman House is actually zoned multifamily. And then the property to the west is a multifamily unit. This particular house here in the Oval has been occupied, or had been occupied, by the Secret Service for approximately 12 years, from 1970 to 1982, and is across the street from the Truman home in the Truman Heritage District. The 1,838 square foot residence has 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and will sleep up to 8 occupants. Provisions for off-street parking will include 2 parking spaces on site in a tandem manner in the garage coming off Truman Road there, and 2 on-street parking spaces on Delaware in front of the residence. So the parking requirement has been met. This drawing shows the notification zone for the surrounding properties that lie within 185 feet of this site. And real quickly, I'll give you a tour of the neighborhood. This is looking directly at the property. It faces east. We're looking west at the front of the home. This is looking north up Delaware across the intersection with Truman Road. And then this has the Truman House in it, and we're looking to the southeast across the street and looking due south down Delaware. This is east back toward the square area down Truman Road, and west the other direction. This is from across Truman Road, looking at the north side of the house, or looking south there. You can see the garage where you can back out, pull in, back out onto Truman Road. And this is the multifamily apartment building that lies directly to the west of this property. Staff recommends approval of the short-term rental subject to the following conditions. Number 1, the short-term rental shall obtain a business license in accordance with the City Code and comply with Article 3, Chapter 5 of the City Code. The occupation license number shall be listed on all advertisements and online platforms. Number 2, the short-term rental shall secure refuge collection from a collector who is licensed to operate in the City of Independence. And number 3, the short-term rental shall provide the safety requirements outlined in Section 14-420 of the UDO. And if you have any questions, I'm ready to take those.
Does anyone have questions of Brian? If not, could the applicant please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Austin Conley, and this is my wife, Kirsten Conley. Our address is 206 North Liberty Street, Independence, Missouri.
Thank you. Just anything you would like to tell us?
Absolutely. So my wife and I purchased this house. I believe we closed on December 27th of last year. And we undertook renovations on the house. We weren't 100% positive what our game plan was with the house, but we knew the history of the home, having housed the Secret Service, and thought that it was a very unique property to own. As we got through renovations, we kind of had the discussion that it was too unique of a property not to share with other people, and Independence being a very tourist-driven area, especially the square, we thought it would be a great opportunity to do a short-term rental, and so we went that route. I provided you guys with some before and after pictures. The home was in really good structural shape when we purchased it, but it was just very, very dated. So we did a pretty substantial renovation, most of it cosmetic, but we did replace all the HVAC and made a lot of upgrades to the systems of the house to make it more habitable and more comfortable for whoever it is that is going to be staying in the home. Really our biggest goal was just to share this story with everyone else because it is a very unique property. So we've really tried to keep the home as true to its original architecture as best we could. If you'll notice in some of the pictures, we did go through the channels with the Heritage Commission to expose the original front porch. Sometime in probably the 1940s or 50s, the front porch was enclosed. We opened that front porch up to expose a really beautiful front door that kind of luckily for us was protected from the elements for so many years. And we also restored the north entrance, making it back to a garage. Whenever we purchased the home, it had been moved down to a single man door. So we thought it felt more functional to expose that to its original intent to be a garage. So I'm open to any questions you guys have. That's just kind of our backstory and how we ended up here. Any questions you guys have, I'm more than happy to answer.
How long have you lived at your current address?
We actually live above my office. The address that we actually live at is 204 and a half North Liberty. We use our mailing address as my office. I'm an agent for American Family Insurance up here on the square. 204 and a half is just impossible to get mail to, so we have been there for 2 years, just over 2 years.
So I'm not sure this is correct, but is that what they used to call the Truman gas station? Is that where that office is, or is that something different?
No, I believe that's the
yours,
gas station on
okay.
Maple. That would be who you heard at your most recent meeting.
Sure, okay. How do you intend to rent or for the Airbnb, find folks to come and do this? I mean, do you screen them or?
So we are currently operating on the Airbnb platform. Airbnb does screen the people that come through, and we have been serving guests for the last beginning of June, and have had nothing but wonderful feedback from everybody. Feel like it's really been, we've tried to partner with some of the local businesses that we know and drive these people up to the square and kind of help that. We really, our original thought process was that it would almost strictly be people that were coming to see the Truman home and are already going to be in the area, but the feedback we've gotten of people that are coming to town are people going to Kansas City. Actually, we had a guest that spotted our sign, and the day that we were supposed to be here 2 weeks ago, sent us a kind message and asked us how our meeting went, and we had to tell him that it was postponed. And he said to make sure and relay that the only reason he stayed in the town of Independence and patroned businesses is because he wanted to stay at our home. So long answer is we're strictly right now listed on the Airbnb platform online.
And just out of curiosity, what's the rates that you charge or they charge?
Right. So Airbnb, as a listing fee, they charge 3% of whatever it is that we dictate as our room rate. We decide the room rate. Right now, we're averaging, it does fluctuate, but we average from $89 on a weeknight to weekend nights, we're about $149.
Okay. All right, and because you're not too far away, is there, if for some reason they have a problem with the home, how does that happen? Something like the power goes off or something? One of our very first guests was whenever we were having tornado warnings. We do live in close proximity, about 5 to 6 blocks from the home. So we do, part of the criteria to be this is we have to list exit maps on how to get in and out of the house. We also have to have emergency contact, so they have both my wife and I's cell phone number. The guest actually shot us a message, and she was a little bit concerned about the weather, so we actually just popped over to the house, showed her the basement. Luckily, it does have a full basement, so that's been really our biggest issue to this point, but we're in close proximity to it at all times. So. Okay. Does anyone else have questions?
I see that you put the garage door on, which looks very nice.
Thank you.
But Only small cars can get in there, right?
I drive a pickup truck. I drive a Toyota Tacoma, and it does fit in there. It is tight. Cars were not the same size in 1925 when this house was built, but a full-size pickup truck does fit inside of it.
It says that you've got 2 spaces.
Yep, they're
One
double-
outside?
Nope, they're double stacked. That garage actually runs the full width of the house as well as an additional, you can kind of see where that rock wall is. That's kind of an arched piece there, so that gives you an additional, I would guess, 8 to 10 feet. I'm not 100% sure, I don't know that exact measurement, but it does give you enough for two cars deep. And we actually spoke to a gentleman who's now a police officer that lived in the home prior to the family that lived in it for approximately 15 to 18 years, who we purchased it from. And he was joking with us that he had, at any given time, 2 cars and motorcycles and all sorts of multitude of things parked in there. So it is deep enough for 2 cars.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else?
While I applaud you for your venture, my major concern is that of your neighbors.
Okay.
How do you intend to ensure your neighbors that this will not become a party house? It will not become a source of discomfort?
So around the time we started brainstorming that we wanted to go the Airbnb route, we started reaching out to our neighbors as best as we could. So the neighbors to our immediate south are a younger family. They just purchased the home, really similar timeline to actually when we purchased ours. And to be completely frank with you, whenever we introduced the idea that we were thinking about an Airbnb, they did take pause, and we talked to them about it, that really what we're looking here to serve is the historic assets of the community and give people a place to stay. If anybody would have a complaint regarding the house, to me it would be them, because our house is set approximately 5 to 6 feet apart. I mean, they're very, very tight in there, and they so far have loved it, because actually one of our very first guests...
My question is, what do you intend to do to ensure that the house will not become a party house?
So we do have a device in the home that measures decibels.
Okay.
So if there is an issue with a party, we would be the first to know via our smartphone, because we do have a device that if after certain hours, if a certain decibel level is reached, we would do that. I would say the median age of our guests at this point has been skewed over 50 years old.
We've also given our neighbors our phone numbers. If they ever have a complaint, they know how to get a hold of us. And in our Airbnb listing, it specifically says, you cannot have more than 8 people, you cannot have parties, quiet hours are between this time and this time. So it's pretty, straightforward on that's not allowed anyways.
Right.
So it's understood that this property will not become a party house in the neighborhood.
No, and we don't want that either.
The last thing
because
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's not, we don't want parties in our house because then it does damage to our property. So that's not our intention by any means. And if it becomes an issue, we would address it immediately.
Okay. And should the noise level rise above what we would consider reasonable, or you would consider reasonable, then what do you do?
We have direct contact with all guests that are staying at the property, and we would just have to address that directly with the guests, much like you would if you were at a hotel and you become unruly. You're going to get a call from the front desk. We would just be the front desk at that point.
And then you get the second call with these guests that have not complied. What do?
They would be asked to leave. So honestly, we want the home to be kept intact, and with a short-term rental, we thought the best way that we could keep an eye on this property and ensure that it stayed in good shape and was an asset versus a liability to the community would be this route. And up to this point, like I said, we have not had any issues, but if somebody were unruly, then they would be asked to leave the property immediately.
So you have built-in noise measuring systems.
That's correct.
You note on your platform that house may not be used for party purposes.
Yes, sir.
And if they don't comply with that, then you have the right to promptly have them escorted from the property.
That would be correct.
And you will do that.
I will do that.
Okay, anybody else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you guys very much for your consideration. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak in favor of this case? Okay. Is there anyone here who is opposed or who has questions? Remember to state your name and address for the record, and you might want to pull that microphone down.
See if I'm good? I don't
You're
want to
good.
be fast. Okay, good.
I can hear you.
I'm Debbie Twyman, and I live at 416 North Delaware,
Okay.
just a hop, skip, and a jump down the street. The home that you are contemplating reclassifying as a short-term rental is located directly opposite the Truman home and is part of the Truman Historic District in which I live and in which my family has resided for over 120 years. So I have kind of a vested interest in what occurs within my community. What you may not be aware of is that the site has frequently been classified as endangered. Endangered, for example, the Missouri Alliance for Historic Preservation classified it as endangered and placed it on the Places in Peril list. And that was just this last year. In addition to that, the National Endowment, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, has also placed us on their watch list on several occasions. The group noted that the setting of the home within a residential district helps tell Truman's story, and through the years, several homes have been lost, and the district borders have changed. Some buildings within the district have been inappropriately planned or are in need of work, according to the Alliance. The National Trust put it on the Landmarks Watch List last year. It's a dubious distinction that occurs when an area is perceived to be under threat or in decline, and I think should give us all pause. This is a gem, it is a jewel, it is part of our city's heritage, it is what draws people to our community. It's something that long-term residents, and the interesting thing about Independence is that people don't ever really move, we just keep coming back. The district, when we look at that particular house at 224, classifying it as a short-term rental further jeopardizes the character of the district. This is not an ordinary rezoning. It's not an ordinary neighborhood. If you go into a normal neighborhood and you rezone, you're undoubtedly going to get blowback. I do not envy you your jobs by any stretch of the imagination. But here it's doubly so. Given the impact that the district has on our community, not just on our community, but on our state and on our nation, it seems logical to try to do the best we can to preserve it and to keep it intact. Every year, thousands of tourists, hundreds of historians and politicians and journalists come here to Independence, and they do so seeking both inspiration and information about the life of the president who occupied that house and who lived in this district. Opening up a business and granting a business license across the street from the Truman home, and if you are doing nightly rentals, you are a business, you are not a residence. You have changed the tone and the tenure and the classification of the district. You have changed the district. And doing that undermines the character and the integrity of the neighborhood. It's not appropriate. The district has historic preservation guidelines. When it was established, the agreement was made that only single-family units would be allowed within the confines of the district. Just that nothing would be coming in unless it had been previously grandfathered. That was established at the time we set up our national guidelines, our state designation, and our local designation. Individuals who reside within the district were then required to maintain their properties in keeping with the period and time in which Harry S. Truman occupied the district. Believe me, as a person who lives there, and I think Ms. McLean can certainly verify this, that is not always easy to do, because the materials which were used back in the day, 120 years ago for my house, in many cases are no longer available. It places a hardship on the people who live in the district. But if you say you want to buy a house and you want to live in that district, you agree to abide by the guidelines. And no one who purchases a house there is not aware of these rules. We have a large booklet that goes to every person who purchases a house in that district, and it cites the rules for every property. It behooves us to remember that when a city changes the rules for a property, it means you have to change it for everything within that district. You've opened the door. If we can do a B&B there, we can do a B&B in my house. If we can do a B&B in my house or there, we can do it in the house directly next door to me that has 2 units on the back that were not grandfathered in. There is no reason that they cannot come to you and ask for another waiver. If you grant it to one, what's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. And failure to abide by that opens the city up to lawsuits. This neighborhood does not need additional tourist lodging. There are tons of places to stay in Independence. There is no shortage. It requires an immediate emergency response from the city. You don't have to step in because we've got a crisis on our hands. The neighborhood, however, does need to maintain its historic tone and its historic character. It isn't preservation if it turns the neighborhood into a collection of businesses rather than homes. Harry Truman was always referred to as the man from Independence. That was what people called him. And they called him that because at the end of his presidency, where did he go? He came back here. Why? Because it was home. Even though he had to buy it back on the courthouse steps, even though he had to borrow money from his friends in order to be able to do it, this was home. And when you talk to people who knew the man, what they will tell you is he considered his neighborhood, his friends, the people that he walked down the street with, to be the reason he was the man that he was, the reason that he became one of our country's greatest presidents. We have a trust. We have been entrusted by our previous generations, we have been entrusted by future generations to protect this district, so that when future families and kids and historians and journalists come back and they want to learn about Harry Truman, they can walk the neighborhood that he walked. They can go from his house to his office just like he did. And I know because I used to walk with him. They can understand that he knew the people sitting on the front porches, that they were his friends, and that he loved them and that they loved him. Don't change the character of my neighborhood, please. Protect what we have. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions? Oh, there's stuff up there. I could talk for hours about the economic impacts and the issues associated with it, but that's not what matters. What matters is the character of the district. And I understand wanting to be a part of it, and I understand wanting to open it up and share it with the world. I truly, honestly do. But you change a designation and you start a ripple. And we can't do that. We are already endangered. Let's not go the rest of the way. It's just not okay. Questions?
Not at this time. Thank you. Is there anyone else here who has questions or comments? Yes, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I want to thank Commissioner Ashball, Wiley, Ferguson, McLean, Mr. Preston, for the opportunity to expound on my feelings about the district tonight. Can I ask the staff to put up a slide that they had put up earlier on the statutory requirements?
Sure, they'll look for that. Sir,
You had it circled. It was in the first.
He'll look for that. Remember, you need to state your name and your address for us, please.
Oh, my name and address. Okay. Cecil A. Vaughn,
Okay.
411 North Delaware,
Okay.
Independence, Missouri, 64050.
Thank you, sir.
That name's been taken in vain before. I figured you all knew who I probably was.
I haven't had the pleasure of doing that. Okay.
Do you know the
Sir, if you turn around and look
Slide
at it,
if
why
I'm-
don't you turn around and look at the screen?
I'm not sure what
Right, I was
slide,
looking,
That one?
what slide were you talking about?
the one that met the statutory requirements for,
Listing your property, getting refuse,
beg your pardon?
listing the property.
I actually didn't have a slide for that. I had the notification zone. But as far as the code requirements, I just read those.
Okay. Well, I'll make this short. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I've lived in the district since 1989. I'll take that back. I have owned property in the district since 1989. I bought a piece of property that was, the city was subject to demolition because it was in such bad shape. I put a lot of money into that property, a lot of sweat equity into that property, for one reason. I wanted to live in the historic district. I have always and always will oppose any commercialization of that district. If you want to buy property in that district, live there. If you don't want to live there, don't buy the property. It's that simple. Now, if I'm understanding right, and staff correct me, I get off on sermons every once in a while.
Member, speak to me, please.
Now you made me lose my train of thought.
Just
Will,
that's the rules.
just a second. Will staff or will the commission explain to me what this new classification of property will mean in the future? I heard the part about restrictions to it.
Okay. Yes, they can answer, we'll have them answer that question when it's time to do that for you.
If these kids would decide to sell this property tomorrow, am I looking at a payday loan? Am I looking at something other than a live-in residential property?
We will ask and find out. Okay? But that portion of that's a little later in our meeting here tonight.
You will have to speak up, sir. I'm a little...
That portion, at this portion, people who have questions get to ask their questions, and then the question is answered in the next section of our meeting.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
But we'll make sure we get that question answered for you, all right?
That's all I would say. If, you folks have lived, some of you have lived around me for a while, you know, that if Mr. Truman wanted to live any place in the world, he could have lived there. If he'd have wanted to live in a commercial district, he'd have moved when he got out of office to Key West. But he chose to come back to Independence because it was home.
Right.
And I'd like to see it stay the way it is. I'm not against bed and breakfast. When I bought my property, I had one next door. But the people lived there that operated it. So, thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to ask questions or speak against this case? Okay. I'm going to declare the...
He needs to have a chance to rebuttal.
We had this question last time. Okay, I was wrong. There is a period of rebuttal. So, before we have a rebuttal, though, I'd like to have his question, Mr. Vaughn's question answered about the short-term rental, what that means, again, because it's kind of new to our code. So can you explain, for example, what happens if they sell the house? Does it remain that, or does this only go with those owners? And once they sell, it reverts back?
It's with the property, right? Yeah, just with the owners. And other than this use that's spelled out with
It's a special use,
yeah,
correct? So it doesn't change.
the underlying zoning, which is the R6, and the
Right.
things that are allowed in an R6 can continue to be allowed in an R6.
Okay, sir, did you understand what that was? It only goes with the owners.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. It only goes with the owners, so they can't just sell it to anybody else who may or may not take care of the property as much as they say they're going to. It'll revert back to R6. All right. Mr. Austin, would you come forward and answer the questions you heard, or?
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more that I don't want this to become a commercial district, and this is not what our intent with this property is. And I also want to state that while this property was in good shape, as we started restoring this home, we revealed areas on the exterior of the home that have probably not been painted in over 50 years. This house, in my personal opinion, is in much, much better shape than it was the day that we bought it, through a lot of money and through a lot of my wife and I's sweat equity to get this house into its current condition. I completely respect the fact that this is a historic district, and while there are certain people that may disagree with this, I want to share this story with other people. That's why my wife put an 8-foot timeline in the dining room that explains Harry Truman's time through politics, through his presidency, and then returning to independence, opening the library, and how this house ties into that story. Our goal is to share this with people and for this house to remain an asset to the community. That house was a few years away from being in serious, serious trouble. There were leaks. If you'll look in some of your pictures, there's a green living room in there that has a massive spot of plaster that was completely gone because of water leaks. There had been a water main bust in the upstairs. The upstairs bathroom was completely unusable, and not only that, it had collapsed part of the ceiling in the home. All of that was repaired and restored. This is not a house that has been renovated. It is a house that has been restored. We want to hold the character of this home, and it's as it was meant to be, as it was built in 1925, and our goal is to share that with the visitors of this community. To say that this side of town does not need additional lodging, I would respectfully disagree with that. I think that you have a pocket, a generation of people, and it's not just a generation because we've had guests that have tipped over 80 years old so far, that want to stay in a unique place, that want to have a unique experience, that don't want to go stay at a Holiday Inn. That's, a commercialized eastern side of town. We have those. We don't have a place for guests to stay really other than the higher grounds, which is just a couple of doors down. So there already is a little bit of this on that block. So really all we're trying to do is provide a unique experience. My wife is an architect, and her bug, I guess, of historic buildings is what has driven us to own a couple older buildings in this district. Anybody that owns a property that is over 100 years old can relate that it is not something you do out of anything other than a labor of love. We love the house. We want to share that. We thought it was selfish to not share it with people, and we want to tell an accurate story. I've reached out to the only living Secret Service agent that served in the house and tried to speak with him about the house, and he seemed to love the idea. So I don't want people to think that we're trying to come in here and commercialize this district or do anything unethical or anything of that sort. really all we're trying to do is share. Independence has a really unique story, and my wife and I have only been here, my wife's been here about 5 years, and I've been here about 7 years. And we're just trying to be a functioning member of this community and help share a unique story. And that's really all I have. If you guys have anything else,
This property, when you purchased it, how long had it been on the market?
I would say around 30 days. I'm not 100% sure. We were not the first. It was around a month. There were several people that had looked at the home, but I think collapsed ceilings and plaster work and non-functioning plumbing scared a lot of people away. The house needed a lot of work to be habitable.
Not for purposes of changing your property assessment, but for purposes of what you did to improve this property.
Yeah.
What was your cost? Take it from the picture here on the left.
Approximately $40,000 on top of the purchase price of the home. It was not a half-hearted restoration. We did our best to keep all the true character of the home, but try to modernize it and make it a little more functional as far as the bathroom and kitchen go. But we did not alter the floor plan or anything. It was just a lot of kitchen cabinets, countertops, bathroom fixtures, the very expensive rooms of the house.
Any other questions of Mr.?
I do have a question, but I think it's probably more a staff question.
Okay. Any question of the applicant? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Do we need to close or? No?
I don't know anymore.
All right, I'll ask my question then, and we can just correct ourselves later. So my question is, as a short-term thing, yes, that. Do we collect hotel tax on this? Or is it just, we do?
Yes.
Yes.
That's good. We need new sidewalks up there.
I couldn't agree more as somebody.
That was.
Okay. I will go ahead and close the public portion, if that's okay with everybody. And ask for any comments. There was one thing that I can't remember what it was. So does anybody else have questions of the staff?
Yeah.
You go ahead, please.
This is a little bit outside the box, but after listening to the first, the lady here, I realized that how valued this neighborhood is. Therefore, is it possible that we can create some form of price control, which always drives market, where, and although I think this business owner, this property owner, is intentioned on preserving his equity, but is there a way that we could actually dictate a price to ensure that the market or whoever is in this particular house values it appropriately? Perhaps he should raise his rent double it. It appears that value is such that you perhaps ought to consider a substantial increase, or maybe you would, depending upon the demand. I think
It's possible. Do you want him to actually answer that question?
I don't know. Perhaps he should.
Well, go ahead and come forward and answer his question, please.
To be completely honest with you, I couldn't agree more. I would love it if I could double my nightly rate that we're currently charging. My wife and I's philosophy on our current rate was looking, something that I think we should address is the fact that there are a multitude of Airbnbs currently operating within the city of Independence, and I am the second person that is attempting to follow this brand new ordinance. There are several in this neighborhood that are already operating and operating without any sort of issue. We used those as addressing what the current market rate was. And we wanted to come in near market rate and get guests and get reviews, because the Airbnb platform is almost, their algorithm is almost strictly driven by your reviews. My goal is to have a 5-star review so that I am the first one whenever you type in that you want to stay in downtown Independence, Missouri, that I'm the first place that you see. If the market drives my rent to $300 a night, then absolutely I'm going to let the market drive it there, because it would be silly for me not to.
Speak to one other point for me. The character of the neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
Will there be any form of outside signage
Absolutely not.
or anything that would make this property look anything different than any other home?
Absolutely not.
You don't have to
From the
put
street view,
anything
the
in
house
window. You
the
don't
house
have to
looks
put a yard sign.
absolutely not. The house looks no different than any other house on the street. It looks no different than the day we purchased it, other than it is a different paint color, and we removed the front porch to restore the original piece. Other than that, there's no signage. It is a home that we share with our guests. Nothing different. I'm sorry?
Did,
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, didn't, excuse me for 1 second, I'm sorry. Didn't you mention something about meeting with the Historic Commission,
I am on the Heritage Commission, yes, sir.
or Heritage Commission? Okay. Well, okay. So did you folks talk about this and about what you were doing?
Yes,
to the house?
through the Heritage Commission, whenever I presented it in front of the Heritage Commission, I did recuse myself from the vote. Obviously, it was a conflict, but I was fully transparent with what our intention was as we did that. I've also gotten to know all of the park rangers. One of the volunteers is actually in the crowd tonight, and he's a neighbor, and I've gotten no complaints from any of the park rangers. They actually all love it, and most of them, I've noticed as I'm mowing my yard, point to the house, and I have people waving at me as they're there. So I think it's become part of the tour, is people pointing out that now that you can stay in the same home that the Secret Service did as they protected Mr. and Mrs. Truman.
And the Heritage Commission, that was well received? and-
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Twyman had mentioned something about a book or something that was given to the Truman District people. Am I correct? So do you guys know anything about that? Does staff know anything about it? Or does Ms. McLean know anything about that?
I know there's a lot of restrictions. If there's a book, I haven't seen it, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
Good answer.
It just means I didn't ever see it,
Okay.
but there are a
You
lot of
guys don't know?
restrictions.
I'm not familiar.
Make sure you give your name for the record, Tom.
Really? Tom Scannell, Community Development Director. As far as the guidelines, I'm going off of memory, but it was a number of years ago when the National Landmark District had their guidelines developed, and those guidelines were passed out to all the property owners at that time. And I know that Wendy Shea works with new owners who come into the district and tries to get those guidelines out to those property owners, explain try to address any questions that they may have, explain the guidelines, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the outreach that Historic Preservation does.
Also, do you know about historic, preservation and how things are, it was on the endangered list supposedly as far as a historic property?
I know that we have had, within the district and the surrounding neighborhoods, there has been concerns about homes that have been fallen into disrepair. Or homes where there were improvements that were made many, many years ago prior to the guidelines that aren't in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. And the city, through our preservation division, has been working with the property owners to address those. I know that she has worked directly with this applicant. I know that she's worked with other property owners within the district in making sure that those properties are maintained, and whenever there is a a property that comes on the market, I know that Wendy does reach out to those property owners, and again, just tries to get out in front of those before any damage has been done to any of those properties, whether that's a inappropriate renovation or anything like that. And Wendy is involved in all permit reviews and things like that, again, to ensure that the preservation guidelines are being met.
Okay, but if it's classified as that, it's just merely informational. There's no grants or money or anything to help keep that, or is that not the case?
The federal district, that's an honorary district, but within the local district, any exterior improvements need to go before the Heritage Commission for review and approval.
Yeah, but more to my point was just because it's acknowledged or it's designated as an endangered district, just as informational, it's not saying, oh, it's an endangered district and therefore you can get a grant or you can get this if you want to comply with preserving this heritage district.
Correct, yeah, the grants to repair the property are sometimes challenging to get, so it takes a lot of equity from the property owners to maintain those properties.
Okay. Well, while we got you up here, does anybody else have questions?
To the best of your knowledge and perhaps with the advice of counsel, deed restrictions, is there anything by virtue of historic district deed restrictions that would prohibit us or prohibit the operation or the licensing of a business in that district?
To my knowledge, no.
The answer is no.
Yeah.
Due to the fact that this house is in the Truman Corridor, was it purchased with tax abatement?
No, not to my knowledge, there's no tax abatement on this property that I know of.
Thank you.
And that tax abatement program has been closed for a handful of years to new tax abatement applications.
But it goes with the house, if it's still on there, when you sell the house, the new owners can assume that. And so it
Correct.
can go on.
Correct, yes.
Yes.
All right. Anyone else have questions for Tom? Thank you, sir. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, questions, comments, motions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
in the matter of case number 19-400-01, short-term rental at 224 North Delaware Street, I move that we approve this for short-term rental with the stipulations as recommended by staff.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second.
She can second it.
Who
I think she said it a
seconded?
little faster than me.
Heather.
Who seconded?
Heather.
Me.
Oh.
I can't see a reason.
And I do have a question before you take the vote. This is special use, so is our decision the decision, or is it passed on to the city council?
It's finalized here.
Okay. All right, unless there's an objection, we're ready for the vote.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Yes.
Commissioner Preston,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiley,
Yes.
Commissioner McLean,
Yes.
Chairman Ashball.
Yes. Case number 19-400-03, short-term rental of 224 North Delaware Street has been approved. There's no other surprise business for us. This is it? Correct?
Just the approval of the minutes.
Does anybody have any changes, comments on the minutes?
Nope.
The minutes will stand approved as written. Any comments to staff? Any staff, any comments to us? We're all good?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, then we stand adjourned at 6:56 PM.